You're listening to the On Your Mark podcast, a space for honest conversations with the school system leaders shaping what's possible for early readers. From high-impact tutoring to building trust with families and teens, we dig into what it really takes to make early literacy work for all kids.
Welcome, everybody, to the On Your Mark podcast. I am your host, Mindy Sjoblom, and I am excited to be joined today by Kelly Elrod, Assistant Superintendent for Instruction and Continuous Improvement at Anderson School District 5 in South Carolina. Kelly, welcome. I really appreciate you spending some time with us, especially on this busy pre-holiday break week. So thanks so much for the time.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Mindy, for having me.
I would love to just get started by hearing a little bit about your journey to this role. Tell us about how you got into education, where your path has gone, and exactly why you ended up in the seat that you're in right now.
Well, this is year 35 for me. So I spent 5 of my years in a district county doing early childhood preschool, actually, special needs. I have an undergrad degree from Clemson University, which is just right down the road, in early childhood. And then I went back and got my master's in special education. And so I utilized that for the first portion of my career. Then I decided I'd get married, and we ended up living right outside of Atlanta. So a big change there to one of the fastest growing districts in the nation. And my principal there saw potential in me to become a literacy specialist with working with all of our beginning readers in a school of about 2,200 students. So wow. I was mainly supporting 16 first grade classroom teachers with guided reading, instructional literacy, what their day looked like. I spent 6 years in that role in Gwinnett County, and then transferred back up closer to home, came into Anderson School District 5 as a parenting coach coordinator for our early childhood programs, was the early childhood coordinator at the district level, then decided when my children went to elementary school that I needed to be in their elementary school, so became their assistant principal, which was not always the fun part, being mom and assistant principal.
Oh, that's got to be tough. My kids would have killed me if
it was always one of those things that's like, got to be sure that we're, above board in everything we do, and you can't have any special treatment just because mama has a key to the building.
That's right.
So spent a few years there, and then was asked to go to a failing Title I school in the same district and open it the next year, which was a modified calendar year. So it came around very quickly. As the principal of that building. And we were a school that was struggling academically, spent 5 years there with a turnaround plan, left that school to, with a good rating on a report card at that time, to move to a new elementary school that was being built in the district, and to open as a brand new, so that a brand new elementary school, that's not something everyone gets on their resume. And it was very intriguing to me, and something that I truly enjoyed, building a new culture there, setting the expectations for learning, setting the expectations of just what the community would be about, the community of learners, the community of parents, all of the stakeholders. Spent 5 years there establishing that, and my superintendent at the time asked me to move to the middle school because that demographics fed into a middle school that had not had consistency with a principal since the longtime principal 5 years prior to that retired. So they had been filling in the vacancy with 4 different people in those 5 years. And I came along and kind of stabilized that middle school, and ended up loving middle school. Had a little bit of background with that, with some special ed placements and practicum, but learned there very quickly that middle schoolers are a different breed, but they are just small children in bigger bodies.
That is right.
You have to love them where they are, take them from where they are, and move them to that next level. So a lot of the skills that I feel like I utilized as a principal at an elementary school, I saw that there was a need for that to continue on in that middle school realm. For example, just to give a brief jump into this, and I know it's not where we're headed, but small group instruction. there still was that need before our state took on MTSS, and supporting students in that way, that we needed time with children to focus on skill sets that they needed development on, especially from the standpoint that not all students sitting in a science class were a reader. So that teacher had to be able to support and scaffold that information so that student could be successful in that content area. So I brought that to the middle school level, and my superintendent asked me then to move on from there to guide instruction across our middle schools. We have 4 middle schools in this district, and I took that role on. It was very short-lived, as funny as it may seem, and learned to love the middle school concept, and my friends who were in those roles still that I was leading down a path. I jumped and moved over to assistant superintendent for human resources halfway through that year. So that process led me to about 3 years in human resources. And then my new superintendent asked me to move back to instruction this year and pick up where we had left off and kind of streamline getting us back on track after COVID, and what that looked like in our district at the time of, well, where we all were in the United States of education, surviving the moment, and kind of piecemealing and grabbing, this works for this group, this works for this group, and kind of pulling us back to singing the same song from the same sheet of music.
That's right. One of the, words that I'm hearing the most in these conversations right now is that there's this great desire and push from leaders across this country to get to coherence, to ensure that all of the different pieces, to your point, same sheet of music, that there's this harmonizing, that the things are actually creating the work of art that we want.
And from my human resources background too, seeing that teachers are frustrated with everything that is out there. There's a plethora of information that they can pull from, and curriculum pieces, and just different things that are overwhelming. And we're losing folks based on that it's a hard job already, and we don't need to add to their platter. We need to be able to make it a nice, well-balanced meal, so to speak. My analogies here are kind of struggling.
You're good.
But making it something very cohesive, like you're talking about, so that they know the path of where they're headed. They know what the expectation is, and they know how they're going to get there. And providing that, my job is to provide that professional development, to provide them those tools so they can be successful in what they're asked to do every day.
Super clear path. I love that. I was talking with a leader from a district in Florida probably about a month and a half ago, and that was her takeaway was like, listen, we need to be clear with everybody about where we're going. We need teachers to be clear with students, and we need to be really clear with teachers around what we expect from them too.
And sometimes less is more with that. We've got a lot of folks coming through alternative pathways that have not gone that traditional route to teaching. And those folks don't understand some of the pedagogy enough to be able to pull those resources behind that. And I'm here to support them in that method, and to kind of, like I said, pull that back to a concise placement for them.
That's awesome. Incredible. I'd love to backtrack and start with some of the things that you talked about in the beginning of your career, from when you first were a literacy specialist. We've seen a lot change in the past, I think really since COVID, in the early literacy space, especially with the science of reading movement. You've had the opportunity to lead and teach in a space that was primarily focused on guided reading. And now the pendulum has swung back around to the science of reading and really explicit instruction in those foundational skills. Tell me a little bit more about, like, what's your bird's eye view, since you've experienced really leading in both of those spaces, and what does that mean for your leadership in the literacy space now?
One of the things that, I loved both ends of it. It's a different, like you said, a different approach to it. But I think what we were always missing with the balanced literacy approach is that targeted instruction with phonics and phonemic awareness.
Yes.
And we may have touched on it in those early childhood classrooms, in a 5K classroom, but even prior to that in some preschool training, but we really didn't ensure that the student had that basis of that knowledge that they could build upon and really be able to play with those sounds and those letters and the development of words based on that skill set. Now, you may have had a couple of teachers that maybe they were taught that way themselves many moons ago. Like, I'm one of those folks that I could have embedded that into some guided reading lessons, but it was more about that balanced approach really did not have that foundational piece leading into it. One of the things that we're focused on this particular year, our state kind of chose pilot programs for our letters training that was certain schools, certain grade levels, certain demographics that they felt like needed that at first, and really embrace that for those areas. And we've added to that as we've gone. This year, our focus has been on 4K. And one of the things, as an early childhood person myself and special ed, I think a speech clinician in those areas that can help guide your teacher with the formation of those sounds and the letters in those classrooms is critical. And I know funding is an issue. I know finding a speech clinician with that background is an issue too. But if we could get those folks to come along side by side with our 4K teachers and do some of that modeling in the classroom with natural classroom environments and situations, that professional development within itself is beyond just what anything they could sit and get any other time in a training could be, because they know that developmental piece for our children at 4 and 5 and can really put it into practice and play in a natural language classroom in a 4K. So we're spending time this year on that with our 4K teachers, and especially with letters training for 4K teachers, and hoping to build that connection with our staff.
It is so true that often the best forms of professional development is watching somebody do it really well, and then having an expert guide you through what you saw to make sure you're seeing the things.
And it's just so embedded. You know what I mean? It's just so embedded. It's in a natural environment, and so we're working toward structuring that with our 4K classrooms.
Interesting. And tell me why the focus on 4K this year in particular? And you're talking about your pre-kindergarten classrooms, right?
That is correct.
They're called different things in different states.
It's our SURDEP classrooms. They're pre-K. They're 4K classrooms that we feel like getting them ready for kindergarten just pushes that envelope to have them ready to read in that phonics piece going into first grade. So we have probably close to 98% of our K1, 2, 3 teachers trained in this. So our last leg, so to speak, is going into 4th and 5th grade and our 4K. So we opted to move on into that 4K model this year, have it all the way through the early childhood years, up through our first tested grade is 3rd grade. And then looking for that next level in 4th and 5th. Now, total transparency, what we are finding is those kids that have moved on through COVID to the middle school, they're lacking in those strategies and, well, the ability for phonics. So some of our diagnostic assessments this year have pushed us to that understanding of it breaks it down into phonological awareness, phonics, everything that are those pre-reading skills. And we're sitting with middle schoolers that are lacking in those areas. And so funny that we should hit on that piece of it. We have hired certified interventionists for our middle schools, and they are primarily elementary teachers.
Heck yeah.
Because of that reasoning right there. So they're elementary certified folks that are doing push in and pull out models to kind of close that gap for those students that don't have that foundational piece. And they've survived this long, but it's been a struggle all the time.
Kudos to y'all for doing that, because Before we started recording, I told you a little bit about my experience as a parent, and my youngest child is dyslexic, and he didn't start getting that kind of explicit instruction that he needed until he was in middle school. And the district was learning at that time, and it's these kids who's like came out of COVID with also without a strong foundation, and he was in a balanced literacy district that wasn't really doing explicit instruction of phonemic awareness and phonics, except in those pockets, like you talked about, Kelly, right, where the teachers could just take it on their own. And we need that kind of support in middle schools. And I also think it takes a really special teacher to do that well. And a lot of teachers are nervous to dive into that space because they think it's babyish or that it's going to be boring for students. But the reality is like, we know great teachers make any content interesting. If they connect with students, they build that relationship. And my son Oscar in particular, once he started getting explicit foundational skill instruction, said, "Mom, nobody ever taught me to read like this." And I was like, I know, this isn't your fault. Like everybody, almost all students, all of our students can learn how to read, right? And we need to figure out the way to do it for those students. And so I'm really excited to hear that you all have focused on putting those supports into middle schools so that we don't continue to pass those problems along with students into spaces where it gets even harder, right, for them to get caught up. I'm just curious, I was going to step back a little bit more broadly as we're thinking about teachers too, your interventionists and the letters training that you've been doing for all of your primary teachers. Tell me a little bit more about your approach to professional development and leading professional development, especially through these times of change, right? Like coming back after COVID and really wanting to streamline things. Like, what has been your approach in the district and leading the district to ensure that teachers are getting just what they need?
So I'll be the first one to tell you it's been a struggle this year from the standpoint that we had 12 different campuses at 12 different places. And even with our intervention, coming back and trying to figure out what is the standard that we think is a good practice for our students. And we're a district that is a very centralized city district with a lot of poverty. We have maybe, I'm thinking right off the top of my head, 3 schools that would not qualify for Title I funding out of the 12.
Wow.
So that's a huge majority. And we're about population size, about a 12,000 student district. Yeah. So a medium-sized district, with looking down the road. And I've tried to look past this year because not only were we coming in this year with me being new, my elementary coordinator for curriculum is new.
Yep.
My middle school coordinator has only been here. This is her second year. But just looking at what does that look like for down the road, more than just a year's time and getting us through here. But we changed our diagnostic assessment this year. So that was a full training path to get everyone K through 8th grade understanding what we will be doing differently, because we had been using the same diagnostic assessment for probably the last 18 or 20 years.
Wow.
So that mindset, it's a shift, and everyone looking at that and what principals even coming to training this summer and going, now, what am I going to be able to gain from this, and how am I going to be able to utilize it? And what information am I going to take away from each assessment? So that's been a process. And then again, we were under a new adoption for our math textbook. That was huge. Yeah. A different shift in how we learn, because we had been following the Fisher-Fry model of I do, we do, you do. Well, this particular model is just the reverse and focuses a lot on, the CRA approach and just trying to make that shift with professional development. So this year, we still have some cohorts that have a group of letters training going on for ELA. They've got math, new textbook, and they've got our new diagnostic assessment. So balancing all of that, if I were to show you the spreadsheet or the Google sheet and how many layers it is to it and all the links, you would be going, we take it a day at a time, a snapshot at a time, and we try to get that information out systemically. Now, Moving forward, one of the things that we know along with our literacy development is we are looking at next year a universal design for all learners.
Yeah.
And that is going to encompass everybody doing everything that they've been trained to do, but it's also going to capture where our direction is going as a district pre-K through 12th grade and beyond. Because, what we're seeing with our MTSS process and our approach to literacy is that during COVID times, we had a funding that we needed to work through and spend that was, okay, we'll hire this person. They're doing this program. This person will help with this, pulling that all back together to say, Tier 1 instruction is where we've got to make the most impact. And that Tier 1 instruction has got to be, what are we doing for every student in our classroom, and not just saying, well, Kelly's struggling in this, so let me give her over to this person and let that person deal with that struggle. It's more about grade level standards and what we can do to meet everyone, all meaning all.
I love to hear that you all are going to be moving in the direction of universal design for learners. It's such a cool framework.
Yes.
And I've seen, just in my work with new career teachers in particular, some real mindset shifts around how we can support all of our learners, right? And it's those mindsets that I think really end up driving all of the action that ends up making such a difference for kids.
Absolutely. And just thinking about strategies, and it might be my special ed background, but thinking about strategies that, teachers need tools in their pocket just to be able to pull out, because we are also having a large growth spurt with our ML population. And, if it's this strategy is good to teach this student how to read, then it's good for all students. And there may be a little bit of differentiation that you need to do in that classroom, but it's a Tier 1. We can't say that, oh, we'll send that to the ML teacher and let the ML teacher, that's not their role. Their role is not that instructional piece. Their role is to help support that student within their educational environment. So it's going to be a little bit of a mind shift. It's something I'm excited about. I'm working on getting everyone's that's been all over the place with PD back to one centralized path, and we're moving together through this process.
I can imagine there's a bunch of change management that goes along with that, right, Kelly? Like, especially, when we've been doing things a certain way for a while or have had a lot of autonomy, how do you really help support school leaders and teachers to lean into those changes and to really help dispel that kind of resistance that might come along the way?
I feel like personally, it goes back to the why. And for example, we come back to school at the end of July, and I don't want them to think that, okay, what's going to fall on me when I come back in July, because, everything's new. Everybody reinvents the wheel when I come back, and I have to work all these days and get ready, and I don't really know what's happening. So our last PD of the year, which is actually March, and this may come with a little bit of controversy, but from a building level and a district level perspective, what are you going to do with new training in March that you haven't had all year? And, so my take on that is we're going to start front loading in March what's coming for next year, so they can start building their mindset around it, having those conversations, talking with colleagues, looking at information. We know teachers work during the summer. We know that some of their time, even though they may not be on the clock, is spent thinking and preparing, what am I going to have in that classroom for next year? And so one of the things that I want to do is be able to front load that in our PD. And then in May, I'm going to lay out into the entire district, principals, which they know this is coming, but principals, all of our teachers, hey, here's what your PD looks like for the next year. And that's not anything that is, I don't think, as far as it's new, because I mentioned I worked in Gwinnett County. At that time, we were one of the top 10 fastest growing in the nation. And we had a 5-year PD calendar built out. And that shocked me. It was amazing. But it was knowing the path that you're going down
Yeah.
and making that plan for how you're getting there.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my goal, is to give teachers that up front. Administrators, I've been kind of dropping little gifts along the way and talking about those things. And we'll be really fleshing that out after the beginning of the year,
Yep.
and being able to push forward what the thought process and the why behind it. Because if you don't give them the why, it's just another thing that they're having a hoop they're having to jump through. But if you can ground that in, hey, I've got this information, I've got data that says that we've got to do something with, whatever the case may
Yep.
be, then it gives teachers understand that, and they appreciate knowing I'm not just doing this because someone had a new toy that they wanted to put.
Or they went to a conference and all of a sudden
Right.
had a new idea,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
That's incredible. I mean, I think that's got to provide a lot of relief to teachers, because there's nothing worse than coming back after your summer break and having already done a lot of the planning work and then finding out from your leadership that things are going to be different than what you had anticipated. So
Absolutely.
I think that they will be really grateful.
I've already thrown out the new schedule for next year and what days are going to be theirs, and how we're going to build the professional development throughout the year, and what that looks like, listening to them and hearing what they need at their schools. But saying, okay, it kind of goes back to the curriculum choices that I had this year, getting us all on the same page. Y'all, we're a small district. We have about a 40% transient population that they may be at this school before Christmas, but come January, they're coming back and they're going to be sitting over here at this school. So we've got to be on the same page with what we're doing with pacing guides, with the curriculum that we're using. So this year I took on, it's been a struggle, but I took on the hard fact that we're all going to use the same curriculum and do it with fidelity. Because my take on that also is, now we can absolutely supplement with your training, with your skills, with what you've had in the past. But if this curriculum has been vetted and we are holding true that was the best thing for us as a district, then why is one school picking and choosing that they're going to use bits and pieces, but this school is all in?
Yep.
It doesn't quite work. We have reading coaches in every one of our buildings that is supplied 50% by the state, and we take on the other 50% of that funding. And they've been key and instrumental in supporting teachers as they work through what this curriculum looks like. It's only 2 years old, and they were given choices prior to me coming in saying, oh, if you want to use it, use it. If you don't, it's okay. Well, that doesn't tell us if it's going to work or not.
That's right.
We've either got to be all in, or we've got to find something that is going to work.
Yep. I think there's been also, a big buzz around high quality instructional materials, and that whole adoption process and how schools are really managing those adoptions. They're hard. And so kudos to you for really, standing in the gap to make sure that folks are using with fidelity. Because to your point, we don't know if it works if we're not actually using it the way that it was intended as well.
And our state has done, I give them credit for this. They have invested in high quality instructional materials and placed all of that into a hub of resources for us at the state level. And so I had heard about it when I was instruction as the middle school person 3 years ago. And it's exploded since then. It was just coming on kind of target at that point in time. And funny part of it is one of my mentors, who actually hired me here out of Gwinnett County, was in charge of it at the state level. So coming back into it full time, I reached out and I'm like, where are y'all at with this? And she said, funny you asked, because we've invested millions upon millions from the state. And she said, now if your district has chosen this particular textbook, she said, your teachers can log in through our site and that particular textbook comes up for their resources based on the district that they're associated with. So they have just resources that they can pick and use right from what we're telling them
That's
to
great.
do. And once again, it's going back to that less is more comment that I made, because if we're taking all these other things out and not piecemealing something together, you've got one thing that is there for you to take and use. Why would you not do it?
Go and get really, really good at that.
Yeah.
And it's so awesome to hear about those resources being so easily accessible for teachers as well. I'd love to dig in a little bit further just for our final bit here on supporting struggling readers. How do you ensure that students who are falling behind receive the kind of individualized intervention and support that they need so that it doesn't become a problem down the road?
Sure. So that is part of our a multi-tiered student support system. And we have interventionists at every building at the elementary level.
Wow.
Some of those are certified hourly folks who may have chosen, hey, I don't want to work full time as a teacher anymore, but I still want to be in a school. So they're working 25 hours a week and just doing some small group type of pulls where it may be curriculum based, or it may be through our diagnostic that they're targeting on specific standards to fill those gaps in. We're trying to centralize that and bring that all back in one location. The other thing, though, that is really key that some schools have embraced this year, and I did not come in and say, this is mandatory, this is how we're doing the intervention. If you've got a strong person to do this, but it kind of goes back to what I said about our speech clinicians earlier, that I have pushed the envelope this year, and we're building upon this, of intervening in the moment. Instead of waiting and seeing how this child does on, or this student does on an assessment, or how this child does on a particular unit test, or where there's a deficit here, those interventionists in some of our schools, and I'm anxious to see the diagnostic at the winter that we're given this past week and compare those, is for those who are doing push-in models, and they're in the classrooms right then and there. So if you've got your reading time, and it's a scheduling, it's not easy to schedule that.
Oh, I know.
High school scheduling is one thing, but when you're talking about an elementary and everybody on the grade level wanting to teach ELA at the same time, and you've got one interventionist, you've got to schedule it to where you can be creative in that time so that the interventionist can go and intervene in this classroom where that instruction's taking place, and maybe the teacher's giving them a skill set, but then that interventionist is going in and doing another small group with that student involved in that, or individual, whatever the case may be. But it's actually taking them where they are at that time in that unit, that skill set, that standard, and bridging that gap and scaffolding for that student. So that's been a big push for me personally.
Yeah. Where are you, what materials and resources are you supporting those interventionists with, and what sort of training and professional development too?
So our reading coach, they fall kind of up underneath our reading coaches in the buildings. And we're looking at standardizing those resources that we're using right now. Every school, as I mentioned earlier, has been doing something different, because during COVID with ESSER money, this school felt like this program worked. This school felt like this program worked. So that's something we're evaluating through this process this year. We've also picked up a central housing place for our reading plans for individual students.
Okay.
And that is through Ed Plan, because our state also has the law that requires us that if students aren't at a certain level by the end of third grade, that they are retained in third grade.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to be sure that what programs we're using are best for our students. And once again, that's an evaluation piece that we're working through this year to find out what's working. All of them have great research behind them, but we want to narrow that down to just a couple of options, because once again, we have that transient population that if I'm in UFly at this school and I'm working through that process, that I transition to a school across town and they don't have UFly as a program, I can't be picked up and I'm sitting there waiting for that intervention to happen. and what does that look like? So I feel like if we have a structure in place and a common pathway in place, that will support students wherever they are in that learning process, no matter what school they're sitting at in our district.
That's awesome. And thinking about it in terms of those more transient populations makes a ton of sense, because we're seeing, especially in a lot of the schools that we work with, we're seeing that a lot more, where it's kids even just moving within districts from one school to a different school. And again, that coherence matters for kids. It totally matters. That's great. I have like two final questions. One is like the big picture sort of magic wand question. If you think about Anderson 5 years from now, what do you want to be true about it compared to where you are right now?
I want to have those systems in place for our kids that, I mean, we have the framework now, but I want to be able to, I want an MTSS coordinator, to be honest.
Yes.
And I know that's a budgetary item, but I want that person to be able to know that they can pick up a child and move them into a program at another school that will meet their need and have every bit of that background information and know where they are. And I want the teachers in those classrooms to feel supported and know what that tier 1 instruction is when that child walks into their classroom and they say, oh, they've got a reading plan already. Well, here's where they are and here's what they're doing. And they can look at it like that. They understand what that means for that child, because we're all teaching from the same model.
That would be absolutely incredible. I like that 5-year vision. We're about to head into a break, and I know you're going to have a busy break. So perhaps that wasn't the right way to frame this question, but I'm curious, Kelly, this is a podcast about reading. What are you reading right now, or what do you want to be reading shortly after the next couple of weeks?
That's a great question. I am reading a couple of different things. And yes, it is busy time of the year for me, but I am doing something with All Means All. It is about students and how you're hitting everybody in that tier 1 instruction. And the other thing that I am looking at, and this is we did not even touch on this, and it's okay because I'm not there yet either, but I'm starting my thought process about, and I know you may not can see that, but from the inside out, because we need to talk about how our grading system is set up, what that looks like, and are we doing what's right by children and by students. We have some different things coming down in our state, and we're looking at some processes that we have used over time with our grading. And is it equitable for all students? Is it equitable to, give students second chances on test? What does that look like with an elementary student versus a high school student? And do they understand that at an elementary age? Middle schoolers have a hard time understanding that, but it's just trying to stay ahead of what's next and where we'll be with instruction in 5 years, as you're talking about. I like to leave a place better than I left it, and who knows where my stop may be, but it might be grandma at home. I don't know. It may be, but what does that look like for Anderson 5? I've been here. This is my 24th year in this district, the 11 years in 2 other districts prior to this, and this is home for me. And, I walk down the street and I think, who's going to be at the grocery store when I'm there in 5 years? And are they Anderson 5 students that have come out? And I see them all the time, and they're like, weren't you my principal at so-and-so school? Yes, I was. And, and to see them and see where they are, I want them to be productive, and I want them to be the best they can be. So I'm looking at that big picture here. I may not see those students day in and day out, but I want to walk that graduate across the stage in May that is as competitive as anyone else in the workforce.
Well, thank you so much for that, Kelly. It's been really, really awesome to hear more about your leadership today, and also your dedication to Anderson 5. And I think that last answer really leaves it exactly where we need it to be. And those graduates are super lucky to have you as well.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the On Your Mark podcast. If today's conversation sparked a question, idea, or story of your own, we want to hear it. Connect with us on LinkedIn or YouTube, or visit onyourmarkeducation.org to discover how we're accelerating early literacy through powerful school partnerships and evidence-based intervention.